The story you think you know, the one about the Prescott heir and the girl from the slums, is a lie. I am the truth buried beneath it. The heir of the powerful Sterling family, Cassian Sterling, arrived in the Riverside Flats like a storm breaking over a stagnant puddle. He was searching for the girl who had saved him from a criminal group 3 years prior. That girl was me. On the day his black town car crept down our cracked pavement, my fraternal twin sister Lila acted with a speed born of desperate greed. She shoved me into our shared bedroom, the lock clicking with terrible finality. Through the thin door, I heard the rustle of fabric, the white sundress I'd saved for months to buy, the one she'd always coveted. Our faces share a 70% resemblance. In the right dress with the right desperate hope blinding him, it was enough. I listened, pressed against the door as her footsteps hurried away. Minutes later, I heard his voice, a low, resonant barry I hadn't heard in years but recognized instantly, filled with emotion. "It's you," he said, the words thick with relief. "Cassian," Lila's voice, pitched higher, sweeter than she ever used with me, floated back. "You finally found me." That was it. The die was cast. My sister, with my face and my story, stepped into the golden light of my destiny. In the following weeks, despite the Sterling family's very public objections, Cassian was adamant. He would marry his savior from the flats. The newspapers ate it up. Modern Prince Charming defies dynasty for true love. They called him a paragon of unwavering devotion. On their wedding day, televised with nauseating saturation, Lila made sure I was in the front row. As she walked down the makeshift aisle in the community hall, her eyes found mine. Beneath the lace veil, her lips curved in a smirk of pure, gloating triumph. "Look at me now," her gaze screamed. "In this life the crown is mine." I felt nothing. No rage, no heartbreak. Only a profound, chilling calm. I had already lived this lifetime once. I knew how the fairy tale ended. I'd learned the hardest lesson. Real equity in a company you build, the solid weight of 49's gold in your hand, is infinitely more trustworthy than any role in a gilded, melodramatic romance. Later that night, amidst the raucous beer soap celebration our parents threw, Lila cornered me by the rusted sink. The scent of cheap wine clung to her. "You had your turn in the last life, Arya," she hissed, her voice low so no one else could hear the madness in it. "You soaked up all the blessings. Now it's my time." She locked me in again that night. But this time I didn't fight it. I sat in the dark, listening to her muffled, excited pacing in the next room, the occasional gleeful whisper to herself. The cadence of her words, the specific hungry anticipation, it confirmed what I'd suspected. Lila wasn't just stealing an opportunity. She was operating on stolen knowledge. She too had been reborn. My first life unspooled in my memory, a ghostly reel. That night 3 years ago, Cassian, bruised and limping, his ankle twisted from escaping his captors. The suffocating darkness of the old-growth forest, the only sound our ragged breaths and the distant hoot of an owl. He was tall, much taller than me, but fear and adrenaline are powerful fuels. I carried him on my back for miles, my muscles screaming, until the lights of the town police station gleamed like salvation. After he returned to his stratospheric world, he looked for me. Only me. When he found me, he didn't offer a check. He offered himself. "Marry me, Arya," he'd said, his intense gaze boring into mine. "Let me repay you by giving you my life." I refused. I, Arya Vance of the Riverside Flats, understood the immutable laws of the universe. He was Cassian Sterling of Sterling Global. Our worlds weren't just separate. They were fundamentally incompatible, like fire and ice. One always consumes the other. But Cassian in that first life was stubborn. He declared I was his one and only. He fought his parents, publicly renounced his arranged marriage to the heiress of the influential Thorne family, and in a grand, theatrical gesture, severed ties with his family. His devotion was a bludgeon. It wore down my resistance. I was young and part of me was terrifically, foolishly flattered. I wavered. Only later did I understand the terrifying physics of such a union. A single careless heartbeat from a man like Cassian Sterling could send tsunami waves through the fragile ecosystem of an ordinary girl's life, erasing her shores entirely. The memory of that understanding still sends a cold spear through my chest. Now in this second life the script played out identically but with a different actress. When Cassian, reunited with his savior, poured out his heart to Lila, she didn't hesitate. she accepted with a greed that shook her whole frame. Our parents, Walter and Margot Vance, acted as if they'd won the cosmic lottery. My father, his face flushed with celebratory rotgut, slurred his praise. "Lila, my girl. You've changed the fate of the Vance name. We're made." Lila's face shone with a voracious pride. That night she came to my room, the warning soft and venomous. "Don't even think of trying to take him from me, Arya. He's chosen me this time. You don't stand a chance. He's going to make his family accept me, and then he's bringing me home as his wife." I looked at her, this sister who was now my enemy from 2 lifetimes, and said nothing. All I wanted in this new, precious life was distance. An ocean of it between me and Cassian Sterling. Let Lila have him. Just as before, Cassian played his part as the rebel aristocrat perfectly. Before a bank of microphones he announced, "I will not marry Elara Thorne. Being born into a dynasty like mine can be a gilded tragedy, but I will not bow to its script. I choose love." The media frenzy was deafening. The Sterling and Thorne families became a public spectacle, their humiliation tabloid fodder. Emboldened, Lila quit her data entry job the next day. She spent her hours now studying online tutorials on etiquette, fashion magazines, and the chemical compositions of luxury skincare. She was in rehearsal for the role of Mrs. Sterling, practicing her lines and her smile in our cracked mirror. It was during this fervent preparation that Cassian came to visit. I was heading out to the library when I literally bumped into him on our dilapidated porch. Reborn, this was our first meeting. A torrent of old memories, sweet, painful, bitter, surged within me, then stilled, settling into the calm of a deep, undisturbed lake. He was exactly as I remembered. Tousled dark hair, eyes the color of a stormy sea, a presence that seemed to swallow the shabby surroundings. When Cassian saw me, he froze. His eyes, sweeping over my face, snagged on the familiar features I shared with Lila. A faint, puzzled frown creased his brow. Before he could speak, Lila materialized, a whirlwind of forced cheer. She latched onto his arm with a possessiveness that was almost violent. "Cassian, you're here." As she maneuvered him past me, she shot me a glare that promised consequences. But Cassian's gaze remained on me, traveling from my worn sneakers to my simple ponytail, lingering on my eyes. In those dark depths, I saw a flicker of something unsettling, not recognition, but a deeper confusion, as if a pale hand were trying to tear through a black veil shrouding his mind, desperate to reveal something just beyond his grasp. My fists clenched at my sides, my heart hammering a frantic beat against my ribs. A new chilling fear took root. What if he remembers? Our past life's early days had been sweet. Deceptively so. I wasn't naive enough now to believe such sweetness had any lasting power. I had tried desperately to mold myself to fit his world, a square peg punishing myself against a round, gilded hole. I saw the way his friends and family looked at me, not with malice, but with a bland, dismissive curiosity, as if I were a slightly unfortunate pet he'd brought home. They didn't need to insult me. Their mere existence, their effortless belonging, was indictment enough. I remembered telling him early on that I wanted to get my master's degree. Before he ever re-entered my life, it had been my plan. A year of studying and part-time work to buy my own future. But Cassian had other plans. A lavish wedding. A honeymoon on his private jet, hopping from one impossible locale to another. "A master's is exhausting, darling," he'd said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "You're my wife now. You don't need to struggle. It hurts me to see you strain." Every time I brought up my studies afterward, he'd gently deflect, then firmly dissuade. Once he even came to the learning center I'd secretly enrolled in and charmed me right out the door. He was, in that moment, sincere. He wanted to give me the world, to cushion me from every hardship. Until the day the cushion became a suffocating pillow. "Arya, I give you a substantial allowance every month. Where does it go? Can't you put in a little effort to elevate yourself?" The disgust in Cassian's voice was a physical slap. It was year 5. The sweetness had curdled. In that moment, standing in our marble foyer under a crystal chandelier that cost more than my childhood home, I knew I'd lost the wager. The one I'd made the moment I said, "I do" to Cassian Sterling. I had gambled my entire life on his love, and the house always wins. He began hiring people to fix me. Etiquette coaches, vocal trainers, personal shoppers who frowned at my natural preferences. He enrolled me in elite spouse seminars. Shop darling, he'd urge. Learn about art, about wines. Learn how to shine. He was trying to sculpt the raw, struggling girl he'd claimed to love into a polished ornament for his world. He once said he loved my strength, that fierce core that made me carry a stranger through a forest. Now he seemed dedicated to erasing it, to transforming me into a delicate, silent doll in the gilded cage he'd built. If a business associate's wife remarked that my accent was quaint, he'd hire a diction coach. If his mother noted my table manners were informal, a stern tutor would arrive. I was being sanded down and repolished daily, not for myself, but so he could hold his head high in a world that would never truly accept me. Kept trying. The person I was trying to become grew more unrecognizable with each passing day, a stranger staring back from my own mirror. Yet his family and their circle still refused to truly see me. Their indifference was a wall I could never scale. The insomnia began. Then the panic attacks in walk-in closets bigger than my first apartment. He never knew about the sleeping pills I relied on, or the discreet therapist I saw weekly, a woman paid handsomely for her confidentiality. 5 years in, he came to me with a new project. Arya, how about we have a child? I stared at him, unsure how to respond. He misinterpreted my silence. You've been part of the family for 5 years, he said, a slight edge to his voice. There's been no progress. I'm running out of excuses with my parents. They still haven't fully embraced you. You need to give them something, Arya. I can't shelter you from everything forever. He softened his tone, a manipulative tactic I now recognized. Tomorrow I'll have a specialist in. Even if it's a girl first, I don't mind. But you know the old guard. They want an heir and a spare. The more the merrier. I didn't let him finish. There's nothing wrong with my body, Cashin. Then what? It's because I've been on birth control. For 5 years. It's easily reversible. I just don't want to have a child. Not with you. Not in this life. It was the first time true rage contorted his handsome features. 5 years of slow-burning resentment ignited. Arya, he seethed, his voice low and dangerous. For you I cut ties with my family. I've given you a life beyond your wildest dreams. I've shielded you, provided for you, and you deny me a child? Deny my family an heir. He took a step closer, his eyes cold. They were right. You were never worthy. You're just a social climber who saw a golden ticket. Did you think landing on a high branch made you a phoenix? Let me be clear, without me you are nothing. I looked at this man, the ghost of the one who'd vowed eternal love, and I laughed. A hollow, broken sound. I had lost. Utterly. Then let's stop the charade, Cashin, I said, my voice eerily calm. Let's get a divorce. Cashin, say hello. Lila's sharp, bright voice shattered the memory, yanking me back to the present, to the dusty porch of our flat's home. I gave a slight shudder. The Cashin before me, the one from this timeline, still believing Lila was his savior, had regained his polished composure. Hello, he said evenly, his stormy eyes still holding a trace of that unsettling confusion. I'm Cashin Sterling. I quietly exhaled. He hasn't been reborn. How could he remember? And if he does, so what? I would never walk that path again. I offered a gentle, impersonal smile. Arya. Lila's sister. Lila practically dragged him inside to our waiting, fawning parents. Her anxiety was a palpable cloud around her. She knew deep down that everything she'd stolen was built on a lie, and it could vanish if her grip slackened for a second. I didn't watch them go. I left for the city library, losing myself in textbooks and application forms. I only returned when I was sure he was gone. Yet as I approached our door, I heard his voice from within. My parents still aren't agreeing to the marriage, Lila. You'll have to be patient for a while longer. Then Lila's voice, sweet as saccharin. As long as I'm with you, I can endure anything, my love. A beat of silence, then her true nature peeked through. But couldn't you push harder? For your parents. They'd never really disown you. Cashin sounded pensive. I went public. What more do you mean? Well. Lila's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper I could still hear. You could go on a hunger strike. Or threaten to cut ties completely. She quickly backpedaled. Not that I want a rift. I want them to accept us so we can be together properly. Cashin gave a soft chuckle. I understand. Standing on the threshold, I smiled grimly. The playbook was identical. Public declaration, then self-imposed martyrdom, then the nuclear threat of disownment. In my first life, his parents, with only one heir to their empire, had caved within a week. I remembered the meeting with his mother, Genevieve Sterling, the day before my wedding. Over 50 but looking a flawless 40, she was elegance personified. She didn't need to say a word. The chasm between us was a living thing in the room. "Arya," she'd said, her smile not unkind, just terribly, terribly knowing. "If you truly choose this path, I hope you will not regret it." No threat, just a prophecy. I'd been too proud, too indebted to Cashin's dramatic sacrifices to heed it. My parents returned with groceries and we all entered together. I nodded at Cashin and went straight to my room. The house's thin walls let me hear that he didn't stay for dinner. He claimed he had to get back to negotiate with his family. I knew the truth. He couldn't stomach the flats, the cramped space, the smell of damp and cheap cooking. He never could. In my first life, he'd called me a rare bloom in concrete. He loved the flower but despised the concrete that nurtured it. He wanted to uproot me, repot me in his sterile, gilded soil. As soon as his car pulled away, Lila stormed into my room. "You were listening outside, weren't you?" I didn't look up from my book. "Don't worry. He's chosen you. I'm not competing." My calmness unnerved her. The guilty are always waiting for the axe to fall. "What are you really planning, Arya?" she demanded. When I didn't answer, her voice turned sharp. "I don't care what schemes you have. If you try to take him from me, I'll make you regret it." I finally looked at her. "Why would I want to take Cashin Sterling from you?" She searched my face, the question she truly wanted to ask screaming in her eyes. "Are you reborn too?" I decided to give her the answer. "You're right, Lila. I am. Just like you." Instead of relief, her face hardened with paranoia. "I knew it," she spat. Then came the threat, laced with the history of our first life's end. "Arya Vance, you got to kill me once. You could try a second time." She leaned in, a sinister smile on her lips. "But I have Cashin now. Crushing you would be effortless." "I won't risk my life again," I said flatly. "If my presence bothers you, I'll leave. I'm preparing for graduate school exams. I have no time for dramas over Cashin." She looked bewildered. You really don't want him?" "Why, it was yours. If I say I won't fight you, I won't." "You'd better mean it," she snarled and left. I watched her go, that desperate hunger in her stride. She was so eager to marry into that gilded prison, she couldn't fathom why anyone with a second chance would choose differently. I'd given her the hint, but she was too blind to see it. My parents, after a talk with Lila, nervously suggested I not interfere. I was too weary for anger. "I'm studying for grad school, Mom. I don't have time for anything else." "You have nothing to worry about." My mother, Margot, simply nodded. Maybe that's for the best. In my first life, my academic dreams had died for Cashin. In this one, I aimed higher, a master's abroad. I buried myself in applications and forms. By the time my acceptance and visa came through, I was ready. On the morning of my departure, suitcase in hand, I opened the front door and froze. Cashin Sterling stood on the porch, his hand raised to knock. Cashin froze, his stormy eyes locking onto me, then dropping to the suitcase at my side. A strange, intense scrutiny filled his gaze, and that familiar, unwelcome unease prickled my skin. "He isn't reborn," I reminded myself. If he were, Lila's charade would have ended months ago. Yet the way he looked at me, it was as if his soul was straining against the walls of this timeline, trying to remember a story written in a different book. I tightened my grip on the suitcase handle. "Cashin, Lila's inside. You should go in." He didn't move. "Where are you going?" His voice was low, devoid of its usual polish. Before I could fabricate an answer, Lila burst onto the porch, a whirlwind of practiced delight. She latched onto his arm, a human shield against me. "Cashin, you're here." She shot me a glare that could curdle milk. "She's just leaving." "I am," I said, stepping past them. As I walked down the cracked path, I heard his question follow me. "Is your sister moving out?" Lila's sweet, lying reply floated after me. "She's studying for some exams. Said it's too crowded here to focus." Then her eager query, "Why are you here? Did you?" His answer, a chuckle laced with triumph, was the last thing I heard before the corner swallowed the sounds. My parents agreed. A sharp, elated shriek from Lila pierced the morning air. I didn't look back. I had a plane to catch. Lila had her golden cage. I had my wings. Landing in the UK was a baptism of cold, damp freedom. The challenges were immediate and brutal. Studying at this level was demanding and my savings were meager. Between lectures I worked. Library assistant, cafe barista, data entry clerk. The exhaustion was physical but my soul felt light, unburdened. It was at the cafe that destiny, in its ironic twist, introduced me to Alara Thorne. She was the woman Cashin had publicly jilted for love. In my first life I'd met her years later, poised, intelligent and quietly sympathetic. The Thornes had broken the engagement swiftly after Cashin's spectacle. I'd only interacted with her once, when she called me to collect a drunken Cashin from a business dinner, the very picture of polite professionalism. Now she stood before me ordering a latte. On instinct, I greeted her in Mandarin, a language I'd been practicing. She turned, a spark of recognition at the mother tongue. Her smile was as gentle as I remembered. "You're from home too." We chatted. She was at the same university for a business MBA. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother, demanding I return for Lila and Cashin's wedding. I typed back, my fingers steady. "Can't. I'm in the UK." Only then did my family realize I'd left the country. The silence from their end was deafening and a relief. Alara's voice pulled me back. "Sorry, this might be abrupt. But do you know Lila Vance?" I saw no point in lying. "She's my sister. Fraternal twins." "No wonder you look alike," she said lightly, sipping her coffee. "My former fiancé broke our engagement because of her." She stated it as fact without malice. "I know," I replied softly. "Cashin's sterling." She waved a dismissive hand. "Don't mind me. I'm just venting to a friendly face." Her eyes, however, held a sharp intelligence. "Honestly, I should be thanking her." Alara became a regular. Our acquaintance, forged in shared homeland and the unique shadow of the sterling drama, deepened into genuine friendship. When my landlord suddenly sold my flat, leaving me stranded, Alara didn't hesitate. "You can stay with me," she said, then added with a wry grin, "but you have to pay rent. Fair market value." It was a kindness disguised as business to spare my pride. For 2 years we were a team. We studied until dawn, celebrated small victories and dreamed big dreams. I never went back. The calls from my family dwindled to nothing. Some blood ties are only geography and genetics. The heart recognizes its own true kin. On the night of our graduation we painted the town. Sometime near dawn we stumbled back to our flat, collapsing onto the sofa in a heap of exhausted joy. My phone buzzed, a rare message from my mother. I ignored it, ready to succumb to sleep. Alara's phone rang. She answered, and the celebratory air in the room vanished. I heard her voice, tense and pleading, then falling into despair. She hung up and shook me awake. "Arya," she said, her eyes wide with misery. "My parents. They've finalized an arrangement. A marriage. They're calling me back." The gilded cage took many forms. I sat up, the last of my sleepiness gone. "You don't want it." She let out a bitter laugh. "Who in their right mind wants a forced merger masquerading as a marriage? Ironic, isn't it? I should be grateful to your sister. If she hadn't played her part, the one walking the plank into the Sterling dynasty would be me." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Get some sleep. We'll fly back the day after tomorrow." She blinked. "But why?" "To fight," I said simply. Her look was suspicious. "How?" "By you marrying me instead." I laughed, the plan that had been quietly forming in my mind for months snapping into crisp focus. "Your parents want you to marry for the family's benefit. They believe only a marriage alliance can bring value. We need to show them that you are the asset, not your marriage prospects." I laid it out for her. A startup. A technology-driven venture in sustainable urban logistics. A field I'd researched exhaustively. I had the concept, the operational model, the hunger. What I lacked was capital and the right corporate umbrella to grant immediate credibility. Alara's eyes went from despair to a blazing hope. "I have capital. My trust fund. And the Thorne name as a shield." She suddenly threw her arms around me, planting a loud, dramatic kiss on my cheek. "Arya Vance, I could kiss you. We're a perfect match. Universe endorsed." As she peppered my face with more celebratory kisses, My mind drifted back to my first life. Heir had tried to start a business then too. I remembered that call after I'd picked up Cashin. It was just business, Arya. I wanted you to hear it from me. Later, I'd heard her project was sabotaged, stolen by a trusted partner. With no viable path, she'd eventually capitulated to the arranged marriage. Not this time. This time she had me. And for 2 years I hadn't just been studying for a degree. I'd been arming myself for war, a war for independence. The harder I worked, the freer I became. Now I had the confidence to fight not just for myself but for a friend. Stepping off the plane onto home soil, I took a deep, shuddering breath. The air smelled of exhaust and nostalgia and resolve. Come on. Heir grabbed my hand, her energy electric. We're going to see my parents. Right now. Her parents, austere and formidable, agreed to one condition. If Heir could launch a profitable, credible venture within 18 months, the marriage discussions would end. It was a thin thread of hope, but we clung to it. After leaving the imposing Thorn residence, I knew I had to face my own past. My family, flush with Cashin's money, had long since moved from the flats to a sleek midtown villa. I knew from the few strained calls that they lived in a state of perpetual awe of Lila, their golden goose. I arrived with small gifts from the UK, a peace offering I didn't truly feel. The moment I pushed open the grand front door, I was met with chaos. My mother's voice, shrill with panic, echoed in the marble foyer. Divorce? He can't demand a divorce. We have a contract. My footsteps faltered. In my first life, my marriage to Cashin had lasted 5 long years. I'd assumed Lila, with her foreknowledge and greed, would have clung harder, lasted longer. 3 years. That's all she'd managed. I stepped into the opulent living room. Mom. Dad. I'm home. The screaming stopped. My parents, Walter and Margot, turned to me. Their faces held anxiety but no warmth, no welcome for the prodigal daughter. I brought you some things, I said, placing the gifts on a glass table. Lila erupted from the sofa. She looked gaunt, her eyes hollowed by rage and fear. She snatched the gifts and hurled them to the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain was shockingly loud. You, she screamed, tears streaking her heavily made-up face. It was you. She launched herself at me, nails aimed at my face. He wants a divorce and you just happen to come back? You've been scheming with him behind my back. Admit it. My mother rushed over, grabbing Lila's arms but looking at me with accusing eyes. Arya, is it true? Have you been stealing your sister's husband? I bent down, carefully picking up the unbroken gifts. My voice was chillingly calm. Don't worry, Mom. I may have studied hard, but not hard enough to learn how to seduce my own brother-in-law. Lila was hysterical. Then why come back now? Because I just finished my master's program now. I stated, each word a block of ice. The madness in her eyes receded, replaced by a dawning, horrific comprehension. She stared at me, her body sagging. You. That's why you never fought for him. You knew what it would be like. A ragged, broken laugh escaped her. So it wasn't glorious at all, was it? Your first life? It was hell. My mother looked between us, utterly lost. What are you both talking about? What first life? You're scaring me. I turned away. I'm leaving, Mom. Where will you go? You just got here, she pleaded, but it was the plea of someone worried about gossip, not about me. I'll be busy. I'll visit when I can. As I reached the door, Lila stumbled after me, grabbing my arm. Her touch was feverish. Arya. Wait. Tell me. Was it like this? For you? I looked at her coldly, this shattered reflection of myself. Do you remember what I was doing, Lila, in our first life when you got in your car and aimed it at me? Her eyes went blank, then wide with the horror of the memory she tried to bury. I was leaving, I said, my voice a low whisper that cut through her hysteria. I had just asked Cashin for a divorce. I had one small suitcase. I was walking away from the Sterling Villa forever. And I saw you in that red sports car he bought you. Your face. It wasn't human. It was just jealousy carved into bone. You smiled at me and you drove. I pulled my arm from her grasp. You've always been a prisoner of your own envy, Lila. In that life you thought my cage was gilded. In this one you built it yourself and jumped inside. I never took revenge because you weren't worth dirtying my hands. And I should thank you. Her breath hitched. Thank me. For taking him. For giving me the second chance. Freedom, Lila, is a taste you'll never know. And it's exquisite. Finally, understanding, true devastating understanding crashed over her. You planned this. You never wanted him. You pushed me into the fire. She began shaking her head violently, denial her last refuge. No. It's not a fire pit. I won't divorce him. I won't. She turned and ran back into the house, screaming for a man who no longer wanted her. I got into the taxi Alara had arranged. It was over. The company we founded was named Evum Logistics. Evum, Latin for the eternal present, the time of angels, a fitting name for our ambition to revolutionize the now. Under the protective wing of the Thorn Group, we operated with a lean, fierce efficiency. Alara's 51% ownership gave her control. My 49%, earned through sweat and concept, was my anchor to this new reality. Our first major contract, ironically, was with Sterling Global. Their shipping division needed a tech-driven overhaul, and our proposal was flawless. When I saw the client name on the briefing document, I felt no tremor, only a cool, professional focus. I was to be the lead representative at the signing. Walking into the Sterling headquarters felt like walking onto a stage where I'd once performed a tragicomedy. The marble floors, the hushed, powerful ambience, it was all familiar, but now it was just a backdrop. I was no longer a nervous interloper. I was a principal with an offer they needed. Cashin entered the conference room, and for a fleeting moment, the mask of the poised executive slipped. Unmistakable surprise, followed by that same intense, searching scrutiny, flashed across his face. He looked at me, really looked, as if trying to solve an equation written in a lost language. "Hello, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice a model of professional courtesy, extending my hand. He took it, his grip firm, his eyes still holding mine a second too long. "Ms. Vance. A pleasure." He recovered his composure, but a current of something unspoken hummed in the air. We sat. I led the discussion, detailing integration timelines, efficiency projections, and cost analyses. The Cashin of my first life would have dominated such a meeting. This Cashin, perhaps softened by 3 years of Lila's drama or simply less experienced than the man he would become, followed my lead. He was capable but reactive, not proactive. "If the terms are agreeable, the contract is ready for your signature, Mr. Sterling," I concluded, sliding the document across the polished table. He didn't immediately reach for it. He just stared at me, a silent question hanging in the space between us. "Miss Vance. Have we met before? Not through Lila, I mean. Somewhere else." I allowed a polite, puzzled smile. "Mr. Sterling, you have an excellent memory for faces. I'm Lila's sister. We met briefly at my parents' home years ago. It was the official non-reborn truth." He shook his head slowly, the frown returning. "No, it's not that. From the first moment I saw you, I felt a familiarity. A deep one." My heart maintained its steady rhythm. He's remembering. Shards are breaking through. I kept my expression neutral, slightly bemused. Perhaps I just have one of those faces. "Now the contract." He hesitated, then picked up his pen. His gaze dropped to the paper, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. He signed and stamped it with an absent finality. A good businessman would have had his legal team scour it again. He did not. "I look forward to a productive partnership," I said, standing and extending my hand once more. He rose, taking it. "Miss Vance, The conference room door burst open with a violence that shattered the sterile calm. His assistant was a step behind, saying, "Ma'am, you can't." Lila stood in the doorway. She was a ghost of her former, preening self. Her expensive clothes hung loosely, her hair was wild, and her eyes were twin pools of feral desperation. When they landed on me, she became a cornered animal seeing its predator. "You." The word was a guttural scream. "You lying, filthy witch." She charged, a blur of manic energy. Cashin moved instantly, stepping between us, catching her wrists and shoving her back with a force that shocked even him. "Lila. Control yourself." His voice was ice, the voice he used on incompetent subordinates. But she was beyond reason. She writhed in his grip, spitting venom at me. "You're stealing him. You're stealing my husband. You'll pay for this." The crack of his palm against her cheek echoed in the silent room. She froze, her head whipped to the side. Slowly, she raised a hand to her reddening skin, staring at Cashin with utter, shattered betrayal. You hit me. Cashin himself looked momentarily stunned, as if his own body had betrayed him. Then his expression hardened into cold resolve. Get out, Lila. Now. Sobbing a raw, ugly sound, she turned and fled. The heavy door swung shut, leaving a ringing silence. Cashin pressed his fingers to his temples, a portrait of exhausted disgrace. He turned to me. I apologize. Profoundly. I felt no vindication, no petty triumph. In my first life he had never raised a hand to me. His cruelty was colder, more civilized. This violence was new, a symptom of the poison Lila had injected into his story. No apology is necessary for me, Mr. Sterling. If there's nothing else. Wait. The word was heavy, defeated. He sank into a chair, not looking at me. I'm divorcing her. She's become someone else. Greedy, petty, obsessed with status. I can't find the girl who saved me in that wilderness anywhere in her. He looked up, his eyes haunted. But she shouldn't have become this. What happened? I watched him, this man playing out a tragedy whose first act he couldn't recall. A cold laugh escaped me before I could stop it. He flinched, startled. Cashin Sterling, I said, my tone flat. If she were still that girl, strong, resilient, indifferent to your world's baubles, content in her own skin, would you eventually look down on her too? Would you try to reshape her, polish her until her own strength was just a memory? Confusion clouded his eyes. Of course he didn't understand. How could he? Goodbye, Mr. Sterling. I left him there, a king bewildered in his empty throne room. Outside the Sterling Tower, the city air was a relief. I was steps from my car when the screech came. Arya. Lila launched herself from behind a pillar, her face a grotesque mask of tears and rage. You said you wouldn't fight for him. Why did you come back? Why? Her shrieking drew stares. She flailed at me, nails seeking my face. I'd had enough. I sidestepped and shoved her away, not gently. In her designer heels, she lost balance and fell hard on the pavement. I looked down at her, my voice colder than Cashin's had ever been. Lila Vance, you think I endured 3 years of study and struggle just to steal your broken marriage? You measure the world in men, so you assume everyone else does too. I leaned down, close enough for only her to hear. Let me be final. I'm not fighting you for Cashin because he is not worth it. Tears cut through her makeup. What do you mean? I never took my revenge because you weren't worth the effort. I paused, letting the words sink in. And also I should thank you. Her breath hitched. Thanks to you I got a second chance. In this life I never entered the golden cage. Freedom, Lila, is a taste you'll never know. So yes. Thank you. The last veil ripped away. He understood. Her eyes widened in horrified epiphany. You planned it. You pushed me into the fire pit on purpose. She scrambled to her feet, shaking her head wildly. No, it's not a fire pit. I won't divorce. I won't. She turned and stumbled back towards the tower, her cries fading into the city's roar. Cashin, don't leave me. I got into my car, my hands steady on the wheel. It was finally, truly over. I delivered the signed contract to Alara. He stared at it, then at me. He signed it, just like that. No haggling, no last-minute clauses. Her question mirrored my own unease. He seemed preoccupied. Alara set the contract down, her expression turning serious. My father told me. Cashin filed for divorce. Officially. I nodded. I know. Then why the easy signature? She pressed. Don't tell me he's shifting his obsession to you. I'm not marrying, and even if I were, I don't do second-hand. I couldn't help but laugh. Relax. He's not your problem. She leaned in, her voice dropping. Let me tell you, the 3 years we were gone, the Sterling family was a soap opera. Your sister. She chose her words carefully. She didn't adapt. She performed. She tried to buy her way into high society and succeeded only in becoming a laughingstock. They called her the gilded magpie behind her back. Cashin's humiliation was constant. That's the real reason for the divorce. I listened, feeling nothing. It was all so predictable. It's their business, I shrugged. Not mine. But the seed of suspicion was planted. Why had he signed so easily? The sterling contract was a key that unlocked doors. Even logistics gained instant credibility. Projects flowed in. Ilara's father seeing tangible success and, more importantly, a daughter who was a formidable asset, finally relented. The arranged marriage was shelved indefinitely. One day, Ilara tossed a folder onto my desk with a triumphant grin. "Here. A gift." I opened it. It was a share transfer agreement. Her father's 49% stake in Evam was being signed over to me. "Ilara, I can't." "You can and you will," she said, her eyes sparkling. "My dad's idea. He says it's retention bonus for the brain behind the operation. He's terrified you'll get a better offer. So take it. It's yours. You've earned it." My fingers traced the embossed paper. 49%. My gold. Solid, real, and irrevocably mine. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Lila, after half a year of legal battles and public scenes, was left with a settlement that seemed vast to our parents but was a pittance to the lifestyle she'd briefly held. She withered, a desiccated version of her former self. I visited my parents' villa one morning. As I stepped out of my car, a modest, reliable sedan I'd bought with my own salary, a laugh like shattering glass came from the porch. Lila sat there, wrapped in a silk robe that looked borrowed from a past life. "Arya, which wealthy old fossil bought you that car? Or did you finally seduce a mid-level manager?" I collected my briefcase. "I'm not like you, Lila. My car has a service history, not a prenuptial agreement." Inside, my parents fawned over me with a cloying warmth that turned my stomach. My father heaped food on my plate. "Eat, Arya. Your mother cooked all your favorites." The unspoken truth hung in the air. I was now the viable asset. Lila was damaged goods. Lila never came down for dinner. "Don't mind her," my father snapped, his loyalty shifting with the financial winds. I never stayed the night. I performed my filial duty, but the cord was cut. The call came a few weeks later. My mother hysterical. "Arya, come quick. Lila is trying to sell the house." She forged documents. The settlement money was gone. Blown on bags, parties, and futile attempts to buy back a social standing that had never been hers. The house was in my parents' name, their one piece of tangible security. When they refused to sign, she threatened to burn it down. I had to send security to intervene. My parents, in a final act of self-preservation, changed the locks and screamed at her on the lawn. "We have no daughter like you. Our only daughter is Arya." I watched from my car, silent. The irony was complete. Driving back to the city, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Arya. It's Cashin." His voice was strained. "We need to meet." "About?" "The logistics pipeline." We met at a quiet tea room. He looked older, the weight of his choices etched around his eyes. He didn't speak of business. "That feeling. It never left," he began, his gaze fixed on me with an unsettling intensity. "The familiarity. I've been piecing things together. Why did the girl who saved me change so completely after I married her? I see no trace of that strong, selfless person in Lila. Not anymore." He took a breath, his words a quiet earthquake. "The truth is, it was you all along, wasn't it?" I stood up, the chair scraping loudly. "Mr. Sterling, if this is why you asked me here, our conversation is over. Please." The word was ragged. "Arya, I need to know. I have nothing to tell you." I turned and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking a sharp, final rhythm on the tile. The roar of an engine was my only warning. A sound so horrifically familiar it stopped the blood in my veins. I turned. A red sports car, a different model but the same violent scarlet, mounted the curb and screamed toward the tea room's glass facade. Behind the wheel, Lila's face was a skull grin of pure, obliterating madness. Her lips formed the same words from a lifetime ago. "Arya. Go to hell." Time fractured. I was frozen, a spectator to my own past. A body slammed into me from the side, a brutal, desperate tackle that hurled us both through the tea room's door and onto the hard sidewalk. The world exploded in a cacophony of a violent crash erupted outside. The car had swerved, missing the spot where I'd stood by inches, and plowed into a stone flower bed. Steam and dust billowed into the air. Ears ringing, I pushed myself up. Cashin Sterling lay beside me, unconscious. He was seriously injured and unconscious. He had thrown himself in front of the car. For me. Sirens wailed. The ambulance ride was a blur of fluorescent light and controlled panic. Cashin was rushed into surgery. Lila, trapped in the mangled wreckage, was extracted, her condition critical. Hours later, in the sterile quiet of the private hospital wing, he stirred. I was sitting by the window watching the city lights flicker on. He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. They found me, and the haze of anesthesia and injury cleared into a focus so sharp it felt like a physical touch. "Wait," he rasped, his voice a dry leaf. But the name he called me wasn't Arya. It was Thuya. My entire body turned to stone. Thuya. His private name for me in our first life. A silly, affectionate corruption of fighter, in an ancient language he'd once studied. No one in this world knew it. Not even Lila. Fully I turned. He was struggling to sit up, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate, locked on me. "Why?" he choked out, a sob tearing from his throat. "Why did you lie to me, Arya? Thuya. Why wouldn't you tell me? I remember now. I remember everything." The past flooded into the present. I saw it in his eyes, the memories of 2 lifetimes crashing together, the dam broken by trauma and proximity. The confusion I'd seen in him for years was gone, replaced by a raw, agonizing clarity. I was surprised, but the fear was absent. I had weathered the storm from shore. I was no longer lost at sea in it. I took a deliberate step back, putting the width of the hospital room between us. In his hollow, chaotic gaze I found my voice, calm and unyielding as granite. "Cashin Sterling," I said, each word measured. "The greatest regret of my first life was marrying you. In this one, my only goal was to stay as far away from you as possible. You were the cage. I wanted the sky." "Don't." He lunged forward, ignoring the 4 tugging at his arm, reaching for me as if I were a lifeline in a shipwreck. I sidestepped easily. A man of nearly 6'3", the picture of controlled power, was now crumpled against the hospital bed railing, crying like a heartbroken child. The sight was pitiful, not poignant. "I'm sorry, Thea. I'm so sorry," he sobbed, the words gushing out in a torrent of guilt and remembered pain. "I was awful. I never meant to look down on you, to try and change you. I'll do better. I don't care what anyone says now, I'll stand by you. Please come back to me. I can't. I couldn't live without you then, and I can't now. I tried to find you after you asked for the divorce, but it was too late. You were already under the wheels. I lost you once. I won't let you go again. Please give me a chance. Let me make it right." I waited. I waited until his desperate rambling subsided into ragged breaths, until the silence stretched thin. Then, with a gentleness that held no warmth, I peeled his clutching fingers from where they gripped my sleeve. I took another step back, fully into the light of the doorway, completely outside the shadow of his world. With the calmest voice I have ever possessed, I spoke the truest sentence of both my lives. "Cashin, I don't love you anymore." The finality in those words was a door slamming shut on a tomb. He understood. His head bowed, the sobs shaking his shoulders, but they were now the sounds of grief for something long dead, not hope for a resurrection. I walked out of his room and kept walking down the antiseptic hallway toward the other wreckage. Lila's room was a storm of noise. I heard her before I saw her, screaming at nurses, doctors, at the universe itself. "Shut up. Get out. Useless. I can walk, I swear I can walk." I stood at the threshold. She saw me and the storm focused into a hurricane of hatred. She threw herself from the bed, her legs buckling beneath her, and crawled toward me, her nails scraping the linoleum. You ruined everything. I'll destroy everything you care about." Nurses rushed to restrain her, pinning her thrashing body back to the mattress. A doctor, his face etched with professional exhaustion, stepped aside and spoke to me quietly. "Her spinal injury is severe. She'll require a wheelchair. Permanently." The screams continued as I stood there, a silent monument to her consequences. I said nothing. No rebuke, no forgiveness, no gloating. She was a scream in a closed room. My words were for the world outside. I turned and left. Her shrieks followed me down the hall, growing fainter until they were swallowed by the hospital's hum. I heard later she was charged with attempted murder. The glittering life she'd stolen had ended in a prison sentence and a wheelchair. Stepping out of the hospital's sliding doors, I was met with the golden light of a late afternoon. It washed over the pavement, clean and unequivocal. The air smelled of rain and concrete and endless possibility. My phone buzzed. Alara's name flashed on the screen, a tether to my real chosen life. Arya. Where are you? The meeting with the French consortium is in an hour. Director Laurent is already impressed with the metrics. He wants to meet the visionary behind them. That's you. Get your visionary backside to the office. A smile real and unburdened touched my lips. I'm on my way, I said, quickening my pace toward the parking garage, toward my reliable car, toward the company I built, toward the friend who was my family. The future stretched wide open before me, radiant and vast. Every choice I had made, the hard ones, the lonely ones, the ones that demanded every ounce of my strength, had been the right one. I was Arya Vance. I had saved myself. And this time my life was entirely, gloriously my own.